know, that would be appreciated just to make sure that we maintain quorum for the meeting. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with introductions. I'll start and then I'll just kind of go down the list as names appear on my screen. Hopefully I won't miss anyone, but yeah, we have a good amount of folks online. So my name is Hannah Oden. I'm a planning coordinator at PAG. So we'll go first on my list. Just feel free to unmute yourself. I'm gonna just give a quick introduction. So first on my list is Alexandra Chavez.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm here from representing Oro Valley.
Great, thank you. And then Anona.
I'm Anona Miller. I'm at the University of Arizona overseeing the commuter programs.
Thanks, Anona. Brandon Gonzalez.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I guess it's good afternoon now. Brandon Gonzalez, principal with Alta Planning and Design, and we're leading the analytics pieces of the project.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. I'll hand it over to Carlos Suarez.
Hi, Carlos Suarez, Tanasarita.
Thanks, Carlos. And then Chris Joannes.
Hi there, everyone. Chris Joannes, Transportation Planner with Kimley Horn and the Consultant Project Manager on the RATP.
Thanks, Chris. And then Javita.
Hi, Davida Mueller. I'm Director of Service Planning at Centran.
Thanks, Davida. And Dion Schwartz.
Hi, I'm Dion Schwartz. I am the traffic manager at the town of Marana.
Thanks, Dion. Dustin.
Hi, everyone. Dustin Fitzpatrick, PAG Environmental Planning Administrator.
Thanks, Dustin. Jeanette.
Good afternoon. This is Jeanette DeRun, Transportation Planning Director at PAG.
Okay, thanks, Jeanette. Jennifer Hobart.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Hobart. I'm a regional transportation planner for the ADOT Multimodal Planning Division. I do apologize, but I am going to have to jump off a little early today at 3 for another meeting.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. And you might wrap up by then, but thanks for letting us know. Jonathan. Jonathan, if you're speaking, you are muted. Okay, we can, Columbia, thanks for joining, Jonathan. Let's see, Kristen.
Hi, Kristen Faltz with Kimley Horn.
Thanks, Kristen. And then Lydia Barker-Winkworth.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lydia Barker-Winkworth. I am a planner with the City of Tucson Department of Transportation and Mobility.
Great, thanks, Lydia. Mike Hendricks. Then, Mike, if you're speaking, we can't hear. Looks like you're still muted. No problem. Thanks for joining. Shamara Smith.
Hello, I'm Shamara Smith. I'm a transit planner here at Centran.
All right, thanks, Shamara. Attendees. And then Nico Geraldo.
Hello, Nico Geraldo, Transportation Planner with PAG.
Great, thanks, Nico. Let me see. And then we also have our admin and IT support keeping us going here. I'm making sure the meeting runs smoothly. So we have Dawn, Jesse, Bree, and Isa. So thank you all for being here, making sure that if we run into any issues, we'll be taken care of.
I think I got skipped.
Oh, yes.
I'll just go real quick. That's okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Dunn, Senior Data Analyst at Alta, and I led the task for data analysis portion of this.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Kelly. And then Ryan, I think I may have also skipped you.
Yes, hi, my name is Ryan Fagan. I'm a project manager with the Tucson Department of Transportation and Mobility.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. And thanks, everyone. Names kind of jump around, but was there anybody else that I missed? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining. So we'll move on to the next item, which is in-kind reporting. we could go to the next slide if there's text for this.
One moment, Hannah. There was
Oh, no
difficulty with the
worries.
slide.
I don't have this part memorized quite yet.
Hannah, we can come back and do the in-kind slide at the end.
Yeah, I just found the text for it, so
Okay.
I can read it now, or we can come back.
Yeah,
But
go ahead and read it.
okay. All right, thanks for your patience, everyone. Yeah, so this is just our general in-kind reporting slide. So regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. A PAC collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know now. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated, there we go, by PAC staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG, RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. All right, and so we can go on to item number 3. And I will hand this over to Chris Joannes with Kimley Horn.
All right, thank you, Hannah. So thank you everybody for being here. We are actually having, this is kind of a supplemental technical working group meeting because as we were planning out our process for how we move forward, we wanted to give an extra opportunity to talk through our methodology before we go ahead and apply for our corridor identification and prioritization exercises. So thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it. We know that you give a lot of valuable input every time we meet with you. So wanted to have an extra one here. If you could go to the next slide, I'll talk through our agenda and what we're planning to get out of the next hour and 15 minutes or so.
Oh, Chris, you should have slide control.
Oh, awesome. I will learn how to do that. Oh, there we go. Awesome. So quick agenda here where I'll give a very quick update on the RATP progress since the last time we met. And we'll have a little bit of time for discussing updates made to our existing conditions analyses that Alta handled. As you know, we sent out a web map and some methodology documentation on those processes and wanted to give an opportunity to talk through what we've updated since then. And so we have a little bit of time set aside, but the bulk of our time in this meeting, we want to talk through that corridor identification and evaluation methodology. So we'll walk through step by step what our plan is there and get your input. And then we'll wrap up with just what to look forward to for the next few months as we start bringing this project together. So our progress since the last time we met, we are in the middle of our kind of major two tasks here. The regional corridor identification and evaluation includes a lot of technical analysis as well as developing our high priority active transportation network and then ultimately coming up with projects that will achieve a very high quality network. And we're also in the middle of our active transportation toolbox. Kimley Horn delivered a first draft of that at the end of last year. We're currently getting some final comments from PAG on that, and then we will be getting that out to this group to review our active transportation toolbox. Last couple tasks are air quality benefits, which we will quantify. You'll actually see that'll begin in the middle of our corridor identification process, where we're going to evaluate a couple alternatives and how they may impact air quality. And then our final task is developing the RATP document itself. Quick look at our schedule between now and the end of the project in June. So as I mentioned, we are doing our regional connectivity analysis. We're just finalizing that right now. The corridor identification and evaluation, we are currently in the beginning stages of, but once we get firm direction there from you all and PAG staff, we'll be able to move through the bulk of that analysis pretty quickly. As I mentioned, we have a draft alternative or active transportation toolbox rather, which we'll be getting out to you all shortly. As we move a little further, as I mentioned, we're actually going to be starting our air quality benefits while we're doing our corridor identification and evaluation, and then beginning our development of the final documentation for the RATP starting in April, having a draft probably by early May, and then doing all of our meetings with you all, with standing PAG committees, and doing our final round of public engagement at that time. We are planning on having a handful more technical working group meetings, hopefully starting with one next month and then a few more later into the spring, so that you all have plenty of opportunities to weigh in on the process and the results and help us throughout the rest of the process. Any questions before we hop into looking at some of those existing conditions analyses and the updates we've made? Otherwise, we can move right into that. Okay, not hearing anything. At this point, I'll hand it over to Brandon and Kelly from Alta to discuss what we've updated since the last time that we met as far as our existing conditions analyses, and have a short discussion. I know Kelly needs to leave early from this meeting, so we maybe have about 20 minutes or so of discussion time in there. So I'll hand it over to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Chris. Brandon, did you want to say anything first?
Nothing for me, Kelly. I'd say go ahead and dive in and walk through the updates.
Okay, I'm sending a request to be able to share my screen so I can share the map. Okay, I think it's letting me. Okay, so I wanted to share with you all the updates that we've made on the analysis maps, the online map that I think a lot of you have seen since we last talked. We got a lot of great comments from folks and have incorporated most of those comments and responded to all of them in that document, which Hannah will be receiving soon. But in the meantime, I can share with you the updates on the maps. So I'll share with you, this is the public facing map that I think some of you have seen. Let's see, is that showing?
There we go. Yep, now
Okay.
it's working.
Great. So just wanted to walk through the updates that we've made. So this is the level of traffic stress that you're seeing now. And I know we got a lot of comments about speed limits and data accuracy. And so Kimley Horn was able to update the data set that we used to generate this. And so we reran the level of traffic stress with some updated speed limits and things, as well as we rounded up sidewalk widths, which had the general effect of giving slightly better scores to a lot of the region. So I think this should show be a little more reflective of people's experiences. That was pedestrian. This is the bike level of traffic stress. And so this, you'll be able to see the legend more when you view it, but this blue is the LTS1. Those are the least stressful streets. Red are LTS4, the higher stress streets. So we have seen some changes there. And then this was also an input to some other layers. For the equity and public health, we made it a little bit more granular by making these analysis hexagons a bit smaller. So now you can see a bit more granularity in that equity analysis in the metropolitan Tucson area. And you can see, but the general results are still the same. You can see the green are the areas with less equity need, and the red are the areas with more equity need. And then there was the traveler alignment layer. So this layer, we got some questions on, and let me start with this. The goal of this is to infer the corridors that people are traveling on and the corridors that could use improvements based on real travelers' origins and destinations. And so the way that we do this, if you might recall, is we access the origins and destinations of modeled trips from Replica and then infer the corridors that those are traveling on. So this analysis shows where short vehicle trips are happening, and that's designed to show that these are areas where active trips, vehicle trips could be converted to active trips if infrastructure were available. And so it's not necessarily saying that, for example, that we need to have a facility on Broadway, but that there is demand going in this general direction in this area, and that this is a place where it could go. So this map we updated. I think we just made some corrections where some trips had been assigned to the wrong corridor, but otherwise it should look similar to what you've seen before. I see a question, Ryan. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah. So something that I noticed and I provided comments on previously was there are some sort of weird combining of different facilities or errors that I found. If you'll notice, if you can look at Fifth Street, it's there's a weird jog. Sorry,
You're talking about this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So we did look at that, and that is based on, this is where it's actually marked as an arterial, I believe, whereas this one, this segment was not. And so what it does is assign trips to the larger road that is in that corridor. And so we did check that, but it was intentional. Yeah.
Well, that is an error then, because that, I mean, that's a residential street that it's jogging down. I mean, Fifth Street is the arterial.
Okay, maybe it must have been an input data error then.
Yeah, and there were also some issues where, like, I remember, I think clicking on that, it highlighted both that segment and a segment of Sixth Street further west. And then there was an issue with clicking on Fourth Avenue where it lumped all of Fourth Avenue completely discontinuous segments miles away with each other. So maybe that's not happening anymore.
Yeah, thank you. We did see that error and we did correct that. So that should be better now.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to I just wanted to highlight that because, yeah, that's, I mean, that's a residential street.
Okay, yeah, thanks for catching that. Yeah, that is, we can chat with PAG if that's something that we want to, how we can update that. Any other questions or thoughts on this so far? Okay, I'll move on. So yeah, so we updated this, and then crossing demand was kind of similar where it accesses the same street network, and this is showing basically trips along this corridor that are trips that are crossing certain corridors. So you can see that there's demand for the ability to cross Broadway, for example. So it's kind of the inverse of the this mode shift potential, which is showing where those trips are happening. So just made a few updates, and like I said, changed those errors that Ryan had pointed out where the wrong corridors were being selected. And so other than this bit, that has been changed. And then the connectivity, we also got comments on this, which were very helpful. And this had been, let's see. So connectivity shows the ability to access different destinations by traveling on the street network. And we do it both when accounting for traffic stress and when not accounting for traffic stress. And because our level of traffic stress analysis, which I showed earlier, was showing some higher scores, meaning kind of more poor conditions than it should have with the data errors. This was also showing worse connectivity. And so once we updated level of traffic stress, we were able to update this. And it's showing that connectivity when you are accounting for traffic stress has improved compared to the previous analysis. So the difference between these and these are showing this is how far you can get from each area in what feels like this is how far you can get in a 15-minute bike ride. And then this is how far you can get in what feels like a 15-minute bike ride, meaning when you're accounting for traffic stress, it feels like it takes longer, and you may in fact take longer routes to avoid stressful streets. And there's just more mental stress involved in getting around. And so this accounts for that, and it shows you kind of the effect that traffic stress has on people's ability to get around by bike or walking. So we made updates to those, and you can see here, this is connectivity without accounting for traffic stress and then with. So there are differences, but the differences are not as stark as they were before we updated the level of traffic stress. And so that change impacted all of these. These ones show it at a bus stop level. And so you can see bus stops that have relatively good connectivity and then bus stops where connectivity is lower. So you can look at that in more detail. And I think that summarizes all the main edits that we made. And so you'll be able to see the responses to detailed comments when we send back the memo. But I believe that we have responded to everybody's comments. Any questions or other comments on that?
Ellie, could you remind me too? I think we also adjusted the data when it came to bicycle and pedestrian collisions to where we were able to differentiate between the two, which I think was requested. So we still have the overall layer, which is the cumulative, but we did include the separation of data as part of kind of the new map update.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think that was slightly earlier update, so I'd forgotten about it. So this is the safety index, which is it's a count of the crashes, but they are weighted by severity. So more severe crashes count for more. And then they are normalized by the segment length so that it's basically showing that kind of weighted crash severity by per mile. And so we had previously just shown a combined one, and then per somebody's comment, we separated out for pedestrian and bike. So you can see where there are differences in crash severity and crash occurrences by mode. So yeah, that is a new improvement as well. All right. Well, I think you'll be getting a new link to this shortly, but I think the link is the same too if you have seen it previously. So thank you everyone for your comments and feedback on this. This was helpful, and hopefully this new one is more useful and tells you more of what you want to know.
And Kelly, real quick, it looks like Dion's hand is up.
Oh, okay. Dion, go ahead.
Question, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In my review, I had noted that a 40-mile-per-hour road with 7-foot bike lanes had the same bicycle level of stress as a 45-mile-per-hour road with no bike lanes. And the response that I got back was anything with any road facility with a speed limit 40 miles per hour or greater is going to have a bike level of stress of 4, or the maximum level of stress. And since there's so many roads in the region that are posted at higher speeds, I'm wondering how that's going to affect the analysis as we move forward.
Yeah, I can confirm that that is the way that we score things in our methodology, and you can see a lot of these arterials are that LTS4 in the red. In terms of the analysis, do you want to take that, Brandon, or?
Yeah, I can cut in. So we'll go through, actually, that's what most of the the meeting is on, but Dion, to answer your question, we essentially aren't using LTS as part of our analysis in identifying the high priority network for that exact reason that if it's an unprotected facility on a major roadway, it's always going to be a 4, especially out in the suburban areas where speed limits are higher. And our improvement that we come up with may or may not change the LTS depending on the context and the project we come up with. So we're actually not using LTS to come up with our high priority network, but we will look to LTS when we're coming up with projects to essentially take that network and turn it into a well-connected active transportation network for pedestrians and bicycles. So there may be situations where we look at a road that has a standard bike lane on it right now and say, well, if we really want this to be high quality and have everybody using it, we may actually want to build a shared use path or something that's a more protected facility off the road.
Thank you, Chris. Kind of a follow-up question to that. I know that the guidance has changed, but years ago, there used to be a discussion in the AASHTO bike guide that talked about how what they called at the time a side path, or basically a shared use path, has a high crash risk because of the turning vehicles. And I'm wondering how that's going to play into the analysis, or maybe we don't see those kind of crashes like we used to back in the 90s when that particular bike guide was published.
That's a good question. I don't know, Brandon, if you have any sort of response on that.
Yeah, I think, at a general level, from an analytics perspective, we were kind of focusing more on the context of being fully separated. So that's why it generally receives a, better score, being fully separated typically from traffic. At intersections, I definitely hear you, and that could be a consideration to make, but I don't think that it affects the scoring at a broad level like this. There's been a lot of kind of design treatments and kind of offsets and things that have been, I guess, integrated at this point into intersection design to alleviate some of those concerns. But it is a work in progress. But for the broader analytics, we look at the length of the corridor or the actual corridor and say that it's full separation, so to assign it a good score.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we hop into that methodology? Cool. All right. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we're moving into our corridor identification and evaluation phase. And we've put our heads together as a consultant team and then worked with the PAG team to come up with a draft methodology that we want to run by you today to get comments on. Let's see if it'll let me advance. There we go. So it's a multi-step methodology that we've come up with. You can see 5 different steps here laid out, and we'll touch on each of these in a separate slide or couple of slides. So first is identifying strategic network packages. So these are, you can think of them as different scenarios. So if we want to kind of put our thumb on the scale for one way or another, just for comparison's sake, a few different methodologies, how does that produce different types of high priority networks coming out of that process? So we've identified a few of those. We've developed evaluation criteria and weighting to accomplish each of those network packages. And then the third step is to run an analysis to identify what those packages would look like. And again, those would be, we have 3 different scenarios planned here. So that between steps 3 and 4 is essentially where we'll run this methodology, see what we're getting for the 3 scenarios, and then we're going to come back to you all as the technical working group and present the results from that. And from that, get direction from you and from PAG staff on putting all of that information together into a preferred high priority network for active transportation across the PEG region. And then finally, after we've identified what that network is, that's when we're going to go back and actually come up with the projects that would help achieve that high priority network or bring it to a standard, a context appropriate standard for encouraging active transportation along those routes. So I'll step through each of those different steps here. So first up, identifying these network packages. So we've come up with 3 different scenarios, if you will, to look at different things across the region. So number 1 is maximizing need-based connectivity. So this is focusing the high priority network on areas with high active transportation propensity and limited active transportation options. Essentially, this is where we're looking for people that may not have a lot of options other than to walk, bike, and use transit. So we're trying to either add or improve facilities in these areas that are really reliant on those types of transportation. That's the first scenario. The second one is maximizing overall accessibility. So this is kind of the converse of package 1. Package 2 is focus the high priority network on reaching the maximum number of potential active transportation trips across the region. So when we looked at, when Kelly was sharing that traveler alignment and crossing alignment map, you see that there were a lot of high priority corridors in areas that were relatively far from the city center. And so this would kind of prioritize those of, where is there unlikely to be a lot of active transportation facilities now, and how do we expand the reach of the active transportation network? And then the third scenario has a big safety focus on it. So we're maximizing safety. We're focusing the high priority network on addressing data-driven and perceived active transportation safety issues. So pulling in the safety analyses that Alta did, as well as pulling in our public engagement that we've had up for quite a while from our survey and online map to see where people have identified safety issues across the region, because even if there's not a data-driven need, there may be a perception of safety that's keeping people from making active transportation trips in some areas. So essentially the plan is to come up with 3 high priority networks from these and then compare those against each other to see, do we go with one of these scenarios? Do we mix the scenarios, et cetera? Any questions on that before I move to the next slide? Or any issues with those 3 packages that we're going to be looking at to kind of inform our final decisions? Okay. Next slide here. So again, all of our development of these high priority networks is going to come from our corridor analyses and our public engagement results. We've come up with 3 different weighting systems, which we'll see here in just a minute, as to kind of put our finger on the scale to create those different scenarios. And the last piece I wanted to touch on here, and it's good that Kelly just showed us that map showing kind of all the larger roads, so you have an idea of what this would look like. But to keep the number of segments at something manageable and viewable at the end, we're going to be performing this corridor identification on the arterial network, and we'll fill gaps if there's anything weird about, like, there's a critical connection that isn't technically an arterial, but we're going to perform our analysis on that. But I wanted to reiterate that we're performing our analysis on the arterial, but the projects that we ultimately will come up with may or may not fall directly on the arterial network. So little graphic at the bottom is just kind of a representation. We may use the adjacent roadway network. We may follow transit routes. We may follow a trail corridor. We may follow a wash. We're just trying to, at a kind of an aggregate region-wide level, look at where the most potential is under these different scenarios. Ryan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, can you elaborate on this, on that point about the arterial network being prioritized, but there might be projects implemented on parallel corridors? Because one of the comments I had previously was about collectors not being part of the analysis. And, in some cases, the distinction between arterial and collector is, we've got collectors that have more traffic than some arterials. And collectors generally being, smaller, lower volume streets seem like they're more of an opportunity for investments and to actually get better active transportation facilities than arterial. So I'm a little concerned, I guess, that there seems to be a priority on the arterial network. And I guess I'm worried that we're not going to be considering collectors as fully as we should.
Sure. So to your point, the collectors may be where ultimately the projects are winding up, but when we're looking at kind of the aggregate travel flows and our accessibility to things, a lot of that is happening on the arterial network. As I talked about with Dion's question before, I believe it was Dion's, we're excluding level of traffic stress from the part of the analysis where we're looking at identifying the high priority network, because arterials, they're number one, are almost all going to score pretty bad because of the speed and volume of traffic. And number two, there may not be opportunities to improve that arterial network in a way that is actually possible. We may need to use bike boulevards or use the collector street that's a quarter or a half mile away. But as far as identifying kind of where the major opportunities are at the regional scale, we just need to get the analysis down to a manageable number of segments that we can score and evaluate. But yeah, we're certainly going to be pulling in the surrounding context of that arterial as we're developing projects. Did that answer your question, Ryan, or any follow-up concerns that you have?
Kind of. I guess I just need to kind of see where it ends up going.
Okay. Yeah, it's really hard when we include like the level of traffic stress map. When you have every street in there, it's just hard to draw any conclusions from it or see the forest through the trees with that many segments. So we've come to this as kind of this is going to almost like a travel demand model, represent the entire network's travel. And then when we develop projects for the high priority network, that's where we're going to get granular with it and come up with the right opportunities, which may or may not fall on the arterial roadway itself.
Okay, that actually helps. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Next piece here, if it'll move forward. There we go. So we've put together a evaluation criteria and weighting that goes with each of those, and they fall under these kind of factors. So public health, active trip potential, travel time, connectivity, traveler alignment and crossing demand, safety, accessibility, and public engagement. And within each of those categories, we've come up with evaluation criteria that quantify each of those. So you'll see a lot of this overlaps very heavily with the work that Alta did. So they did a public health analysis. We want to pull that directly in. Our active trip potential comes directly from that Alta analysis. Our travel time comes from the Alta analysis. Our connectivity comes from that, the traveler alignment and crossing demand. So everything that you guys have seen already and commented on and we've refined, all of that is going to be used directly in this analysis. And what we'll do is package that all together to get a composite score. So that's the first half. The second half is here. So safety, we'll pull from raw crash data as well as the process safety analysis that Alta provided. Accessibility, this is where we're going to put buffers on some a few layers of kind of destinations. So schools, employment centers, regional activity centers, regional parks, and bus stops. And so corridors that fall within these buffers of these different destinations will be get a higher priority score. And finally, public engagement. These are the different points that we had people place inside of our web map. And so we want to plan to directly use those as well. So we'll associate each one of those with the nearest arterial to kind of help get an understanding at an aggregate level where is the public identifying issues. So any questions on the criteria that build up those different prioritization factors? Okay. Next piece here. There we go. So when we are looking at how we weight these different factors, we came up with different weighting for each of the different project packages or scenarios that we came up with. So the first one was maximizing need-based connectivity. And for that, we really pushed public health and travel time as our big, kind of the overwhelmingly weighted priorities in that scheme. And the rest of them are kind of de-emphasized. So there's still every metric is still in there. We're just changing what we're weighting very heavily in each of these. So the first one, public health and travel time, maximizing accessibility. So that's the one where we're trying to reach the most number of people across the region. We went very heavy on active trip potential, traveler alignment and crossing demand and accessibility. And finally, the maximizing safety one, we went very heavy on the safety metric as well as the public engagement metric, because overwhelmingly, the things that people put in the web map, even if they didn't specifically say it was a safety issue, a lot of them were safety issues. So things like barriers and things like that is very often a safety issue at its root. So these are the different kind of weighting schemes that we've preliminarily assigned to each of these scenarios. And then what we'll do is view the outcomes of that at our next meeting and see kind of where is it making sense, where is it not making sense. Ryan.
Yeah, under the maximized safety, the public engagement is weighted pretty heavily. And, I understand that, can, I guess, give us insight into where people are feeling unsafe or where they feel like we need projects. But I also am concerned about, I guess, giving that too much weight when it's, unscientific doesn't seem like quite the right word, but I mean, it's not it's certainly not complete. I mean, it's people who engaged with this and who provided input are not necessarily representative of the entire community. I think it can be a source of ideas for where to put facilities, but I don't know that it should be weighted heavily, just because it can be real problematic, as it is with any kind of like user reported data, like Strava data, for example, to determine where people are already biking. Like I think there's a lot of issues with using.
So do you think we take some of that weight and just add more to the safety category on that one?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if others have other ideas on, what other factors might be worthwhile, I'm open to them, but yeah.
Okay. Deanna, I see you have your hand up, but anyone want to comment on Ryan's comment at all before we go to the next one? Okay. Yeah, we can definitely look at that and kind of de-emphasize the engagement, add more to the safety one. I think we're totally fine with that. Dion?
So I'm noticing that the second package, maximize accessibility, that accessibility itself is not the most heavily weighted criteria. It's 15% versus 30 for active trip potential, or 25 for crossing and traveler alignment. And I'm thinking that's because the term accessibility is being used a little bit differently in each case. It just jumps out at me as kind of weird.
Yeah, fair point. So yeah, the accessibility metric in there is essentially how close things are to different destinations. And again, we're totally open to adjusting these weights right now, and so happy to have this discussion. With this scenario in our heads, what we were kind of thinking about was where are we seeing the potential to convert vehicle trips to active transportation, and we have that specific metric from Malta's analysis where we're seeing a lot of short vehicle trips. And so those two, the light blue and the green metrics kind of cut right to the heart of that. However, I am totally open to if we think that kind of accessibility to destinations needs to be a little bit more heavily weighted in there. I think we're totally open to that. If anybody has suggestions or you think, yes, connecting to destinations is like super important, and so we should give that more weight. And it could be, we can move just a little bit more, and like connectivity has 10%, we could take like 5% from that, move it to accessibility. I think that's definitely fair.
Do you think there's some overlap between active trip potential and accessibility? Like maybe it's kind of connected in a way that is not obvious right here?
So, and Brandon, if you're still on the phone, are you able to explain kind of the background between, I guess, what the difference is between active trip potential? So that is number of trips with active trip potential by destination, number of short vehicle trips per square mile, number of short vehicle trips by destination compared with traveler alignment and crossing demand. So that's number of crossing trips and mode shift potential. Like any way you can expand on that a little more with the different.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So active trip potential is really looking at, where are the greatest number of trips that are less than 3 miles occurring? And so we're really kind of focusing in on where are those number of trips, based on various factors so that we could potentially look at converting those trips to active trip potential. So where the other traveler alignment is looking at, it's not necessarily about where are those short trips, but more about where are people going in general. And, where can we potentially include upgrades to facilities or new facilities that could tap into, where people are currently commuting and what those patterns are. So I'm not sure if that helps, but one is really patterns, taking advantage of that regardless of trip length. The other is where can we convert trips within a 3-mile radius and where those trips are originating and ending within that 3-mile trip length distance.
And then accessibility means what exactly?
So that one was essentially we have a couple data sets of destinations. So schools, employment centers, regional activity centers, regional parks, and bus stops. And this would essentially be a proximity to those that would impact the score. Any other comments on that one? We can certainly, like I said, we're happy to tweak these. So if anybody has any ideas for different weighting they'd like to see, we're open. Okay. If not, I will move to the next slide here. So step 3 of that 5-step process is identifying the high priority network for each package. So essentially what we're going to do is score every segment on every metric and then apply those 3 different weights to them. We're anticipating that may come out with a somewhat noisy output depending on, proximity to schools and things like that, where it may be variable along the length of a corridor. So we're going to go through a process to kind of smooth out the results. So if there's, every other segment on some road is popping up as the high priority one, but for one reason or another, the one in between is not. We'll try to smooth that out to make a connected network in the end. And then we will also at that point work with Alta. The last piece of their scope is coming up with air quality benefits or carbon reduction benefits for each of the networks. So in addition to our scoring and the high priority networks, when we come back to you with these results, we're also going to present what the anticipated or potential impacts to air quality would be as well, to kind of help further give us another data point as we're looking at selecting our high priority network. So then step 4 is selecting that high priority network. So we'll come back to you, present those results. A couple options from where we take it from there. One is we'll come up with a weighting scheme of those factors that's somewhere in between those scenarios. Those were all relatively extreme to see, we really heavily put our finger on a couple of those metrics in each of the scenarios to see how it changes the output. So we may do something that's a little more distributed once we've seen what those outputs are, or we could take a composite scoring from each of those where we, take the score under the different scenarios and average them together or average 2 of them together, something like that. So we can talk more about that once we have those 3 scenario results to show and talk about how we want to put together the high priority network. After we either apply that weighting or apply the composite scoring, again, we'll smooth those results out. We want to have kind of a connected network that shows us this is where we want to make improvements to the active transportation system. Last piece here is that's when we're going to hop in and develop projects. So we will want to bring that high priority network up to a context appropriate standard. A lot of considerations will go into that. Number 1 is if that, somewhere along that arterial, if that link is already made in a really high quality way, there's already an off-street trail, or there's already a bike boulevard that's a block or 2 off of that main arterial or something like that, we kind of say, all right, well, this link is done and we just need to figure out how to expand that over time. The next is we've gone through a lot of work to put together programmed active transportation projects across the region. We've worked with the city, currently working with the county. We've looked through CIPs for other agencies to see where there's active transportation projects already programmed. And so we'll take a look at those locations that are on the high priority network and see, does this bring it up to the standard that we're looking for? I believe most of them will be a yes, because most locations are kind of building to best practices wherever possible. Next is, so links that we either don't have an existing facility or don't have a programmed improvement. We're going to look at opportunities and context around those corridors. So to Ryan's point, it could be collector roads that are a quarter, half mile off the arterial that we actually highlighted in our high priority network. Could be utility corridor, could be a wash, could be, anything we can come up with to make links if we don't think it's feasible to right on the arterial make the improvement that we want to. And finally, that active transportation toolbox, which we're wrapping up a pretty good draft of right now. We want to leverage that for treatments that we've come up with there, and we have in there the context in which you would use those treatments ideally. We'll leverage that as well and essentially come up with a list of projects to plug all the holes in that high priority network. So that in the end, if everything were to be implemented, we would have a good context appropriate active transportation network on all of these locations that we've identified as a high priority. All right, I know that was a ton of information, and some of it may not click until you start to see the results coming in, but any questions at this point on the methodology for kind of how we're going to go from where we are now, which is kind of unlimited possibilities for where to put projects, to these are the locations we want to make improvements to, and these are the projects to accomplish that. Any questions on that process? All right, well, this might be a shorter meeting than we anticipated then, which is okay. All right, hearing nothing. Next steps here. So as I mentioned, we're finalizing that active transportation toolbox that will go out to the technical working group for your initial review here soon. We're just getting final comments from PAG staff. Once we address those, that'll go out. Our corridor analysis. So as I mentioned, we'll go ahead and start implementing the methodology that we just talked through. Hoping in February to have the results at a place where we can bring that back to you all as a technical working group to show you how those 3 scenarios came out, and kind of some potential options for the high priority network. And then after that, when we get kind of a direction forward from you all and PAG staff, we'll go ahead and develop that project list. Shortly after that, so March or April, is where we'll go ahead and do our second round of engagement, where we'll take draft projects out to the public and get their reactions to those. We'll also at the same time be doing our air quality benefits analysis. And then starting in April, we will develop our final RATP document. We'll probably have that draft in early May. Get that out for you all to review, have another meeting at that point, and then put it out to the public and do our rounds of PAG committees and such, and our final round of engagement where we tell everybody, here's the draft plan, give us comments, and just try to build excitement for investing in active transportation across the region. So that is all we had. Appreciate you all kind of thinking through that with us. We're excited to keep the project moving, and excited to actually start getting to the point where we can come up with recommendations and cool projects, because that's kind of, I think, everybody's favorite part of the process. So should be an exciting spring here for us. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Otherwise, Alexandra.
Hi, more of a comment and just a comment on the work that you all did. It's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of jurisdictions, and finding those, trying to get the recommendations in place, and a lot of variables to work with. And then so just want to commend you all on that work there, and how graceful you all are when we have comments on how to refine pieces or areas to improve on. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, we really appreciate that, and always happy. We want, this plan is really all of yours. So we really want to make you happy with it, give you tools that you can use to move from planning to implementation. So appreciate that, Alexandra. All right, with that, I'll hand it back over to Hannah to close us out here.
All right, thanks so much, and everyone. Yeah, good conversation. Yeah, and great feedback as well. So yeah, if there's nothing else from the group, I think we can go on to the adjournment. There we go. So yeah, so thank you all so much again for attending. So yeah, the presentation and this recording will be available online, so I can send that out. We'll follow up with the updated link for that analysis map and anything else. But yeah, if you think of anything else about what was covered at this meeting today or anything else, please don't hesitate. You can send me an email and we will follow up. We want any comments that you have to be incorporated into this process. So with that, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, bye.
Thank you.